almost a third ever returned following the revolution, and they gradually filtered back in as things settled down. They had to pick up the pieces, almost start all over again. And what we have here today, we owe to their work in the industry, and all that they would have found here would have been hillsides like you see now, and a few cottonwoods along the riverbed, and that was it. So the rest we owe to what they have done. The thing that has kept the two communities that still remain, that have descendants of the original settlers like myself, I'm a fourth generation actually, and, is this school. Each settlement had its elementary school, but the only place they could continue their education was here. So those who did return after the revolution kind of congregated here around the school. So today, Colonia Juarez here and Colonia Dublan, which is just north of where you're staying there at the Hacienda Hotel. In fact, the street just north of you, block north of you, is the official boundary between the original Mormon settlement of Dublan and the current city of Nuevo Casas Grandes that didn't begin until the railroad came in around the turn of the century. So anyway, we're proud of the fact that of our graduates here at the school, and I say we just had a graduation a couple of weeks ago. We usually graduate around 50, 60 graduates each year, and over 90% of them go on to continue their education. About half of them here in Mexico and half in the U.S. And schools here, universities here in the state of Chihuahua and along the border, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, that are acquainted with our school, offer our students very fine scholarships because of their bilingual, bicultural background, which is a real advantage in today's world. Most of our students go off, finish their degrees, but not very many of them come back. Being a small agricultural community, there's not a whole lot for them to come back to. So that's one of our challenges, is to maybe find other sources of income, businesses, because most of them always consider this home and love to come back and come back as often as they can, but to come back and live, they need to figure out a way to make a living. So over the past, 50, 60 years or so, the population of descendants of the original colonists has remained quite constant. Generally, out of each family, one or two will return to maintain the family businesses, the rest settle elsewhere. So anyway, that's just kind of a quick overview. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have now. Yes, sir?
What variety of peaches and apples do you grow there?
You know, peaches, as I mentioned, we used to be almost 80% apples, then because the weather changes, not getting the cold we needed, we've gone mainly to peaches now because they require less chilling. We have, dozens of varieties. We start harvesting about 2 weeks ago, about the middle of May, and we go clear into October with some of the later varieties. So we have varieties that spaced out all over the season. And most of them are freestone varieties for fresh market. There are some clings, because in some parts of Mexico they prefer the cling even at the fresh market. So the only peaches that really go for the processing or canning are basically our cold peaches. And apples, we were raising mainly, we're not raising very many of any kind right now, but we were raising mainly Red Delicious varieties of apples. Actually, our Red Delicious apple is very different from Washington Red Delicious apple because of the latitude. We don't get the long, five-pointed, typey, deep red apple. Ours is more like the eastern apple, round and not that pretty color. It's not nearly as attractive to look at, but a much better eating apple. It has a thinner skin and a higher sugar content because of our latitude. So it's not like trying to eat one of those Washington apples. No offense to anyone here, but most of you, that's why they don't sell very many anymore. They've gone with the Fuji and the Gala and the other varieties because the Red Delicious is like so much sawdust. You know, so.
What are you doing, cutting down the apple trees? I mean, it's still producing.
What we are doing mainly is replacing the apple blocks with peach blocks. Because our apple trees just are not healthy and vigorous anymore. They don't get the rest they need, and I guess it's just like a person. You start getting short on sleep, you're going to come down to cold or something, you know, because you just get run down. And that's what's happened with the apples. We just don't get the vigor, the quality, the volume that we used to have, so it's just not profitable to plant apples anymore. The main apple producing areas where you'll be going a couple of days from now up in the Cuauhtemoc mountain area, you'll see that for every apple we grow here, they grow hundreds up there. You know, that's the main area. And up there it's mainly goldens that they produce.
Where do they
I'd be
develop?
interested in knowing, what did they find after the revolution? The people that came back, was their property intact? What did they find?
Well, for the most part, a lot of damage. They tried to get local people that moved in after they established these settlements, people that came in to help and work. They tried to get them, kind of left them in charge and to look after things the best they could. But, you know, the main revolutionary leaders actually treated the Mormon settlers very well. It was the people that were taking advantage of the unsettled situation, the small marauding groups that caused them most of the problems. Most of their cattle had been stolen, run off, or eaten, or whatever, you know, and their crops and fields, and many of their homes had been totally looted and some even destroyed. So it wasn't very nice what they found when they came back.
Do people here kind of have a dual citizenship between U.S. and
You
Mexico?
know, some do. From the time the first settlers came here, they were encouraged to take out Mexican citizenship living in Mexico. And one of our articles of faith states that we believe in honoring, obeying, and sustaining the law of the land. So members are encouraged throughout the world to become good, productive citizens of whichever country they live in. So we do have all the rights and privileges of Mexican citizenship, but most of our cultural heritage, of course, comes from the U.S. So we feel a strong tie and allegiance to both countries. Enough so that we will freely criticize either country, but we are very defensive if anyone else criticizes either Mexico or the U.S. So we feel a strong tie to both countries. And there are people in the community. My wife holds dual citizenship. I don't. I'm just a Mexican citizen, but there are people that do. Mexico used to not recognize dual citizenship, but they do now. There's no problem with it. So. Yes, sir.
How about the tax picture for you folks, dual or whatever your citizenship might be?
Well, if we have an income in the U.S., of course, then taxes have to be filed there. But if all of our income is here, then we just have to worry about the taxes here.
Is it more favorable here in Mexico than in the U.S.?
Property taxes are still a real bargain in Mexico.
Okay.
Yes, they are very low. But income taxes, we're learning too well from our neighbors to the north. we're pretty much on the par with what's in Texas, yes.
There's so many varieties of apples in the markets in the megalopolis areas, and I was wondering how that affects your delicious and things like that.
Well, you know, it definitely does. Not just different apples, but, you know, other types of fruit that are on the market at different seasons also affect the sales because, you know, if there happen to be a lot of mangoes or some other fruit on the market at that time, people go and they may be buying those instead of the
Do those things come from other countries, or are they developed by internal
You know,
orchards?
in Mexico now, it's pretty much like it is worldwide, where things come from everywhere. We get a lot of fruit here in the winter months from Chile because they're on a different schedule. So we get a lot of fruit. We get a lot of grapes and apples and peaches and things that come up from Chile. But our main competition still are the California peaches and the Washington apples because they love to dump them on us here.
What's your population in this valley?
Close to 2,000, depending on where you draw the line up and down the valley. And of those 2,000 here in the valley, maybe about half of them are members of our church. The other half would be Catholic. And of the half, or the 1,000 that are members, only about a third at the most would be descendants of the original colonists like myself. The rest are local members that have joined the church over the years. In the Casas Grandes area, we have close to about 8,000 members, but all but about 600 of those are people who joined the church either locally or moved in from other parts of Mexico.
3 questions in one. Who owns, who works, and who receives the profits from the orchards?
Okay, I guess the workers and the owners both receive profits to a certain degree here. Here in this specific community, most of the orchards are owned by the descendants of the original settlers. Now in the Casas Grandes area, and Janas area, and others where they've expanded a lot, then the orchards are owned by local people that moved in from other parts of Mexico, because when they arrived here, the only settlements were Janos and the original Casas Grandes that were settled by the Spanish back in the 1600s. The city of Nuevo Casas Grandes and these other settlements did not exist. So most of the labor are local people. Now during the harvest season, especially for those who raise chili and other more labor-intensive crops, They sometimes bring crews from further south in Mexico, but most of the labor is local labor here. And then, again, I guess I say that the benefits are shared in those proportions. The owners, if they're successful, make some profit. Some years they don't. And then, of course, those who are working for salaries
I think the question would be more, is there a communal share of profits being made from the?
No, this community is like any community in Mexico, except for that it was originally settled by settlers who came in from the U.S. that happened to be Mormons. But as far as owning the property, buying, selling, moving in, moving out, it's like any other community in Mexico. We have families moving in, moving out all the time, buying, selling, and our local government is like any other place in Mexico. We, instead of having counties, we have municipios, municipalities. Maybe Lado showed you our county building there in Casas Grandes as you came through. That's our county seat. We elect our local officials. You're seeing all kinds of banners on the, right now. Election's always the first Sunday of July, so everyone's busy doing that. How are we doing?
Su atención por un breve momento, por favor. El jueves, durante el segundo periodo.
I'm sorry, was that a
A
question? Were you saying
home,
something?
if you wanted to buy a home, let's say if I wanted to buy a home and
Yes.
my wife and I came down.
Yes, you could establish residency and you could do that, yes, and quite a few people have done that, yes.
Ballpark for your cost of, is what two part.
Yeah.
The cost of a home, your
Okay,
average.
generally, what you would find is the land would be very inexpensive compared to the United States. The home might be more closely proportional in cost. Let me give you an example. The original blocks that they set up here, like other communities they set up the straight, wide streets. The blocks are 5-acre blocks. They're divided into quarters, so that's 1.25 acres per lot. These lots here in town, you can pick up one of those 1.25 acre lots for $15,000 here in town. And large cattle ranches out on the drier areas, especially with what we've been going through, will sell for as little as $50 a hectare, which is 2.5 acres. Of course, the better ranches and more prime land would be more expensive, but in general, land is still very inexpensive. Now, building, you'll find that your materials and to furnish a home and make it the type you're used to or comfortable with, probably run you pretty close to the same. Now, the labor costs are more inexpensive, but generally, you kind of get what you pay for in there, and that they don't do as much labor in a time period as they would when they cross the border. The same fellow, you know, we find it in our orchards. The most we can get them to pick in a day here would be a couple bins. That same fellow, if he makes it up to Washington, will pick 14 bins a day or something like that. And people say, well, it speaks of the difference of pay. Even if we pay them by bin, it's initiative or incentive, cultural, but when they're out there, they know they're there just for one reason, to make as much money as they can, as quick as they can, to send to their families, then they want to come back. They want to come back, basically. No, not in all cases, I don't want to get involved. But here, they have other things that are actually stronger motivational factors than the money. We try it. Sometimes we'll be in a hurry to harvest. We have a large crop or something, and we'll say, look, if you'll stay or pick extra, we'll pay you so much a bit, so much that. But many of them, it's surprising how many of them, they'll work until noon or whatever to where they get their minimum amount. And then they rather go home and enjoy the rest of the day with friends and family instead of staying and getting extra. So you know, it's a different thing. Money is not the number one motivational factor.
Indian
Like it is in
Americans
this
come down
society.
and pick.
If you maintain your U.S. citizenship, you still have to go back periodically and register?
Most of us go quite often. Most of our children are out in the Phoenix area, and my wife and I, that group I just took, I had to leave in Tucson. When I went and picked them up, I left my wife out there visiting with the kids and grandkids. She thought it was great. While I was touring them around, then I picked her up again. So we go back and forth very often. It's probably not a month or two goes past by that we're not somewhere and most people in the U.S. We're close enough to the border that we...
Well, we got 12 million and don't want to come. Whatever that means.
I don't want to touch that issue.
Is there a requirement that you have to maintain your citizenship? Do you have to spend more than half a year?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that once you have the U.S. citizenship, basically it's not revoked unless you do